So in the last video, I talked about the different cost structures in a CRM project, and I said I'd do a video on how potentially to reduce CRM project costs. So I'm going to go through 9 areas where you could potentially reduce CRM project costs. The first, I guess, is perhaps just ask the question, do you need a new CRM system at all? Because a lot of people already have a CRM platform in place. Now, it may be that that's a sort of old, functionally limited system that can't meet your needs, but I see a lot of occasions where people already have a system in place that's pretty current and it's flexible and it's functionally rich. It's just not being used, so they feel they just need to move on to pastures new. Now, it's generally a lot more expensive to implement a new system than it is to revamp an existing system that might not be being used. So there's perhaps something to think about. The other aspect of that is, if you've got a system that isn't being used, is the risk that you're just going to reproduce that in a new platform. So sometimes you just need to do a bit of sort of lessons learned analysis to make sure what you're doing with the new project is going to produce different results from the last. So that's number one. Number two really is around, picking your shots. There's a bit of a sort of Pareto type law to a lot of CRM projects in that, 20% of the system maybe produces 80% of the value. And so if you can really sort of focus in on the areas that are going to have the greatest impact, that sort of 20%, then, and you can strip down the project accordingly, you can have a much leaner project, a lot more cost-effective project, something that rolls out quicker, gives you quicker return on investment, and then on top of that you can start to overlay additional phases and additional items. You don't necessarily have to do it all at once. And I do see there's a lot of projects where people have got lots and lots and lots and lots of stuff that they want to do, but a lot of it is kind of low impact, but it just slows down the project, it increases costs. So just trying to narrow that down initially and layer on top of it can be a very effective way of reducing cost. The third area, and you probably heard me banging on about this a lot in the past, really is about trying to get a nice detailed CRM specification done before you sort of go out to market on a project. And when I see CRM specification, I'm not sort of talking about a bullet point list of functional needs. Yes, we need to understand functional needs. What we're really trying to do is within that spec, set out why we're doing it, what's the business case for doing it, and most importantly, what are the processes that we are going to embed within the CRM system, how we're going to embed them, and how do we see them being structured. That's the core. Now, if you can do that, it just makes things a lot easier. First of all, it removes the risk of scope creep, whereby sort of new requirements are being discovered as you start to roll the system out, and that sort of extends the deployment and increases cost. But the big thing that it enables you to do is to go out to market with a detailed spec, written in a language that implementers understand. It means they can provide much firmer, much more accurate pricing. And that can make a big difference, because the alternative is often what happens is if you haven't got a tight spec, suppliers will just say, well, we can give you an estimate and we'll firm it up when we start the project. And because when they firm it up at the start of the project, lo and behold, they discover lots more additional complexity and lots more additional cost. So just trying to remove that complexity question, just get a nice, clear spec, people can provide you clear pricing to begin with. And I guess that kind of brings us on to point 4 really, which is around, we really want to be doing projects on a fixed price basis, a firm price basis, or very specific outcomes. What you really, really don't want to be doing is having suppliers work on a project on a pure time and materials basis. And by and large, there's no real incentive for them to finish, and it's not a terribly cost-effective way to run a project. Point 5 really is around how you go out to procure. I think it's quite important, if you want to reduce costs, to do that in as competitive environments as you possibly can. We run procurement projects. We might go out to 10, 20 companies. We might have sort of a dozen quotes to review. And let's say there's a par figure of perhaps nominally, let's say 100,000 for a project. What you tend to see is a really wide spread of quotes out there. So at the low end, you might get sort of 40, 50,000, then you get some clustered around a sort of par amount for the project, and then you might have somebody at 150 or 250, and probably somebody at sort of 500,000. They're invariably quoting the same sort of technologies, it's just different implementers. And it's really quite surprising, quite alarming in many respects, how widely dispersed the various different pricing proposals are. I don't know why that is. I think in some cases people don't read specifications terribly well when they're quoting, or maybe it's an inexperienced salesperson, or they just don't want the business. They've got lots and lots on, so they're just going to come up with a silly price, just sort of, just to put you off, maybe in the vague hope somebody might take them up on it, but they're going to make loads and loads of profit on that. So, issue is, if you're just going out there to one firm or a couple of firms, it might be that the pricing that comes back is at that sort of more of that 500k range rather than the par area. So if you're not sort of careful, you can end up spending a lot more money than you need to. So point 6 is it's about brands and labels, and you don't necessarily need to go with the marquee brands. There are loads and loads of different CRM systems out there at lots of different price points, some free. Now, it may be, if your functional needs are fairly straightforward, that actually you can pick something that hasn't got all the bells and whistles, but it's much more cost effective. So again, this goes back to having good sound requirements gathering early stage of the project, so you know what the core things core functional needs are before you go out to the marketplace. Even once you've decided on the technology, you're often presented with lots of different options. Virtually, I think every CRM software package has a sort of an entry level, a professional, an enterprise, an absolute ultimate, all singing, all dancing version. So it's just worth just analysing that very carefully, just make sure that you're getting the version that you need and you're not necessarily paying for unnecessary bells and whistles. Point 7 is really negotiate. Software, by and large, is negotiable. Services are, by and large, negotiable, as is support contracts. A lot of what's involved in a CRM project is negotiable if you want to perhaps haggle a little bit and just see what you can achieve there. It's often quite possible to really strip down costs if you need to. The 8th point, I'd say, is about buying licenses, particularly about the time of buying them. Now, a CRM project, can take several months, in some cases, a year plus to implement a project. Now, you don't necessarily, you're not going to have people using the system while you're implementing it. But I often see people purchase licenses on day one, so they might have 6, 12 months where no one's able to use the system, but they're paying for those licenses on a per user per month basis. So there's big savings to be made in terms of when you purchase licenses. Perhaps you just need 1 or 2 when you're developing the system, but as you bring users on, that's the point to bring in add users to the system. And it's also when you've got pricing presented to you on a per user per month basis, it's easy to underestimate the total cost of licenses. But if you've got a lot of people using the system, it can run to be a big cost. So really think about who needs access to the system. Often it isn't everybody, but I do see situations where people buy everybody a license. So really considering that, you can always add licenses at a later point. The final point really is around DIY, do it yourself. a lot of the technologies that are out there these days, you don't need to be a developer to set them up. You can code around them, but often the core setup, a core build of a system, it's just, it's an admin capability. Now, you just got to spend the time developing the knowledge and skills to do that. There's obviously an opportunity cost to that. If you're losing £1,000 a day to save £100 a day, that doesn't make sense. So you've got to sort of factor in that opportunity cost. But there are opportunities to do a lot of the project yourself, whether that's the basic build of the system or project management or training. And it does have the advantage of acquiring the skills to manage and develop your own system over time, so that you're not reliant on the original implementer once you go live. So sort of that skills transfer happens a lot earlier if you take on more of the project yourself. So there's a lot of benefits potentially to doing it that way. Now you need to be a little bit careful. Now over the years I've seen some absolute Frankenstein monsters of in-house developed systems that really don't support the way people work, and I've seen organizations live with these systems for years, and it can be useful to get advice. If you're not sure and you're looking to build it yourself, it may be worth getting an experienced external resource just to sort of have a look, have a bit of oversight on it, just steer it in the right direction. Anyway, that's 9 ways to reduce the cost of your CRM project. Anyway, hope that helps. Thank you.